My name is Katie, and I would like to share my story with you. My story is about a journey of pain and suffering, but also of transformation. My childhood was filled with many blessings. I came from a loving family that valued togetherness. Through my mother's strength and self-sacrifice, and my father's gentleness, they showed my sisters and I the love of God in the simple act of being a family. My life was filled with wonder at even the smallest things in creation. I had a soft heart for everyone and everything around me. I had a deep concern for the things I perceived to be the most vulnerable in the world, and I desired to protect them. I was such a caring and sensitive child that I would often cry when bugs would get crushed on the sidewalk. My life began to drastically change when I entered junior high school. I became interested in a young man who had just moved to our town. He was different than the other boys I had grown up with. He was unique and exciting. However, he also had a very wounded heart, which I believe is what drew me to him in the first place. I felt bad that he had experienced so much pain and heartache in his young life, and I loved being the one he turned to when he needed a shoulder to cry on. We became very close and spent much of our time together. Eventually, he would become my first boyfriend, and by my freshman year of high school, I would end up giving him the most precious gift that one human being can give to another. I gave him my virginity. By this time, my prayer life had been completely abandoned. I went from a carefree, innocent young girl to a self-absorbed teenager whose brain was completely wrapped up in my worldly life of school, extracurricular activities, and my boyfriend. I was slowly losing my faith. I still went to church, but I was only present physically, not spiritually. I began to lie to my parents about virtually everything in my life. I closed in on myself and tried to hide my unhealthy lifestyle from those around me. By my junior year of high school, my boyfriend moved away and started military school. But we continued to have a long-distance relationship. After being apart for a few months, I was very excited when I found out that he would be coming back home for Christmas. It was during this visit, on Christmas Eve, that I became pregnant. A pregnancy test taken about 3 months later revealed to me what I already knew to be true. I was pregnant. The first of many struggles I had during my pregnancy was suffering from fatigue and morning sickness. I could hardly make it up the stairs to the second floor of my high school. I could visibly see my stomach begin to grow larger, and I wanted to eat constantly. I was not afraid of the thought of becoming a young mother. I had always felt that I wanted to have children someday, and was certain that I would love and care for this child with my whole heart. I knew that being a young mother would be difficult, but I felt that I was up for the challenge. What I was afraid of was breaking the news to my parents. I was not afraid to tell them I was terrified. My parents were definitely the type that believed in waiting until marriage. They had kept their relationship pure until their wedding day, and they wanted my sisters and I to share in this most beautiful gift of purity in our own lives. I knew they didn't exactly approve of the young man I was dating, but I knew eventually the truth had to be revealed to them. A few days after taking the pregnancy test, I worked up the courage to tell my parents that I was pregnant. This was one of the most difficult things I have experienced. After breaking the news to them, my parents just sat there quietly. They both looked very shocked, very concerned, and like any normal parent, very disappointed. We discussed my situation, and they expressed that they were there to support me throughout my pregnancy. I was so relieved. I remember feeling so much respect for them that even through their shock, sadness, and disappointment, they still loved and cared for me. By this time, I had really fallen in love with my baby. It was incredible to think that a tiny little person was growing inside of me. I started to believe that the hard part was over, and now I could just try to enjoy the rest of my pregnancy. Little did I know, everything would change by the end of that week. My parents, my sisters, and I had just begun a wild ride on an emotional roller coaster. We were experiencing waves of different feelings and emotions: shock, sadness, anger, excitement, guilt, shame, and pride. I believe pride fueled the next few days of my life. All of a sudden, it occurred to me that my sinful life had been exposed, and now my whole family was going to be affected by all of the poor choices I had made. I saw how my choice to have sex before marriage was so negatively affecting all of our lives, and I felt like my life was now completely out of control. I suddenly felt the need to protect my family's reputation. I started thinking about all of the people I assumed were going to judge myself and my family. I felt that my teachers, my pastor, my friends, my sister's friends, my parents' friends, and all of my relatives would look down upon me. I thought that I had done such a good job at deceiving everyone, and now the very proof of my sin was growing inside of me. Through all of my fears and anxieties, I still had one hope, and that hope was in my boyfriend's support. He let me know that he was coming into town to visit that week. I was very relieved. I had wanted to tell him face to face that we were going to have a baby. When he arrived, I was horrified to see and hear his reaction to the news. He expressed that he felt that the baby couldn't possibly be his, since the two of us had only had intercourse once in the last several months. I assured him that we conceived our baby at Christmas. This just didn't seem to make sense to him. I was now feeling even worse than I could have imagined. I now had parents who were sad and disappointed, 2 sisters who I assumed were ashamed of me, and a boyfriend who didn't believe that our baby was his. I felt completely alone. Within days of my encounter with my boyfriend, my parents started talking about the financial responsibility they were going to have to take for my baby and I. There was even talk about selling our family's cabin to assure that we would have enough money to pay for future hospital bills and other expenses. The thought of selling our family's cabin pushed me over the edge. Our cabin was a place where our family had many years of wonderful memories together. My parents had made many sacrifices so that we would have a place to share together for a lifetime. And I couldn't handle the thought of my selfishness robbing other people of their happiness. It broke my heart seeing everyone so disappointed. I felt that my baby and I were ruining everyone's life. Within hours of finding out about the cabin, I made the comment to my parents to just make me an appointment. I never said the word abortion, and I never felt that I needed to. They knew exactly what I meant. The next day, my parents made the call to schedule an appointment to take the life of the beautiful child that was growing within me. The days leading up to my appointment were a blur. The only way I was able to get through that week was to turn the switch of my heart from on to off. I also turned off my conscience. I turned off all of my emotions. I knew that I did not want to have an abortion, but I had somehow convinced myself that if I just got rid of this baby, everyone else's life would be better because of this decision. On Friday of that week, my parents and I got up very early and drove to the abortion clinic in St. Paul, Minnesota. I was extremely tired, so I slept the entire way there. I also slept so that I didn't have to think about what I was about to go through with. When we arrived, I got out of the car into a large parking garage and entered what looked to be a tall office-like building. We took an elevator to one of the upper floors of the building, got out of the elevator and walked down the hallway to the doors of the clinic. The clinic was not open yet, so there were several other women waiting alongside of their husband, boyfriend, parent, or friend. There was an overwhelming sense of sadness in all of the people outside of the clinic. Once we entered the clinic, the nurse asked me to fill out some paperwork. After a short time, she brought me to a small office for what they called a counseling session. She started shuffling some papers and asking me some general questions about my pregnancy. She asked me how far along I was, what the date of conception was, and a number of other questions pertaining to my pregnancy. When she finished questioning me, she finally looked up from the papers and made eye contact with me. In a monotone voice, she said, "It really sounds like this abortion is what you want." She never asked me if I wanted this abortion. She had further convinced me in one simple sentence that this abortion was indeed what I wanted to go through with. I lied to her and myself and responded in agreement that yes, this abortion was what I wanted. It took all of me to stay calm and collected. I wanted so badly to burst into tears, run to her arms, and break down and tell her the truth of it all. The impersonal and cold encounter I had with her, however, left no room for truth and love. After this supposed counseling session, they brought me and a small group of girls into a room where we were told to watch a video. This video would give us an idea of what to expect during our visit to their clinic. The video showed a beautiful young woman walking down the sidewalk to what was supposed to be an abortion clinic. She was greeted with a friendly smile and handshake from a nurse who worked at the clinic. The nurse brought her to an office, sat the woman down, and they began having a discussion. They next showed the young woman wearing a hospital gown and lying on an examination table. The nurse was now giving the woman an ultrasound, and she and the woman seemed to be having a casual, friendly conversation. The next scene showed a nurse walking the young patient into a room where her abortion was about to take place. Moments later, it showed the same patient who had just had an abortion being walked out by the nurse and brought to a different room. The nurse sat the woman down and gave her a glass of water and wrapped a blanket around the woman. The two exchanged a warm smile. The final scene showed the young woman back in her street clothes and exiting the clinic doors. She and the nurse shook hands with a smile, and the young woman turned and walked down the sidewalk, as comfortable and casual as can be, into the light of the summer sun. I was relieved after watching the video, primarily because I feared that the video was going to contain images or information that I did not want to face. I also feared that the video may in some way cause me to have doubts or second thoughts about my decision to have an abortion. I felt that I had already made the difficult decision to abort, and that if I didn't go through with it, I was a weak, selfish woman who only cared about herself.
We thought you should know the tissue has a heartbeat approximately 3 weeks after conception. Here's a picture of the fetal tissue grasping the finger of a surgeon who is performing a surgical procedure on the fetus while still in the womb of its mother. This is the tissue after being removed by an abortion procedure. If, after your abortion, you experience guilt, anxiety, psychological numbness, or depression, you should seek treatment for post-abortive syndrome. Women who suffer from post-abortive syndrome often have difficulty forming relationships, abuse drugs and alcohol, and have thoughts of suicide.
I felt that I had to be brave. I kept myself motivated by thinking that my courage to have this abortion would win back my parents' approval. I felt that I had gotten myself into this situation and that having an abortion was the easy way out. After watching the video, I was brought back to the waiting room until they were ready to give me an ultrasound. I'm guessing that they gave me an ultrasound to see exactly how big my baby was. This information would help determine what type of abortion they would perform. I knew that if I caught even the tiniest glimpse of my baby, or saw the tiniest movement of my baby, that I would not go through with the abortion. I just lied on the exam table, as still and quiet and emotionless as I could. After the ultrasound was completed, I was brought to the waiting room until they were ready for the next step in the abortion process. They eventually brought me back to another examination room where I was asked to change into a hospital gown. The nurse explained that with my abortion, they would first have to insert thin sticks of laminaria, which is sterilized seaweed, into my cervix. These sticks are used to absorb moisture and expand, thus enlarging the cervix. I remember very vividly the nurse explaining that once the laminaria sticks were inserted, that there would be no turning back. She explained that if for some reason, after receiving the injections, if I had changed my mind about my decision to have the tissue removed, that out of the safety of my health, they would have to complete the abortion procedure. She also explained that once these sticks were inside my body, they would do great harm to the child if I chose not to abort, and that it was very likely that my baby would be born with severe deformities and complications. After the nurse had given me what I believed was the complete truth, I started imagining the worst. I imagined that after the injections, I still chose to carry my baby to term, and that my baby was born without arms and was hooked up to tubes and machines their entire life. How could I ever explain to my child that they were born this way due to my initial attempt to kill them? I couldn't bear the thought of it. By this time, I had become terrified. I knew that within moments, I would start the process of killing the child that was depending on me for protection, nourishment, and life. I was convinced that as soon as I received these injections, in a sense, my child would be already gone. I can say with confidence that what I experienced in the next few moments of my life was the most terrifying thing I could possibly imagine. As I laid on the exam table, the nurse took my hand and told me that everything was going to be fine. The abortionist walked in the room and told me that he would be done shortly. I remember seeing him hold a metal gun-type instrument in his hand. I held my breath and once again turned off my heart and mind. I then felt the most terrible pain that I've ever experienced in my life. As I received the first injection, I squeezed the nurse's hand so hard that I am convinced that I broke her fingers. Immediately after, I received a second injection. I was so terrified and in so much pain that I started to sit up on the table. I was still squeezing the nurse's hand with all of my might. She and the doctor exchanged a few words, and she then pried my fingers off from around her hand. She was in obvious pain. I immediately started to feel dizzy. The nurse helped me sit up on the table, and then she and another nurse helped me walk out to where my parents were sitting. I will never forget the look on their faces as I stumbled toward them. They were horrified. They asked the nurse what was wrong with me. She told them that I was going to be fine, but they were unable to give me the full number of injections that were required. She told them that we would still proceed with the abortion as usual, but that we would have to wait at least a few extra hours until my cervix was fully dilated. I changed back into my clothes and sat into the chair until my dizziness went away. And then my parents and I proceeded to the elevators that were down the hall. We took the elevators down to the first floor, where we saw a large open waiting area. There was no activity on the first floor, so we found a quiet corner and just waited in silence. My father was on one side, my baby and I on the other, and my mother in between us. I remember just lying there across the chairs with my head on my mother's lap. We all just shut our eyes and pretended to sleep. I don't think any of us knew what to say to one another. We believed that my precious baby was dying. Little did we know that at that time, I still had a perfectly healthy baby that was thriving inside of me. In my mind, I had already walked out of the clinic door as a murderer. After several hours, we went back up the elevators to the clinic. I was brought to a room and was asked once again to change into a hospital gown. I had become pretty good at being an emotionless robot, so I did as I was told. I then lied down on the table with the nurse standing to the right of me. She checked to see that my cervix was fully dilated. She then put a mask over my mouth and nose, which was the gas that I breathed to calm me during the abortion procedure. I was still fully conscious, but had become much more relaxed. I remember exactly what the abortionist looked like when he walked into the room. He told me that it would all be over with soon. I hoped and prayed that he was right. I was given a suction abortion. This abortion procedure begins when a long hollow plastic tube with a knife-like tip is inserted into the uterus. This plastic tube is connected to a vacuum-like pump and is run across the surface of the uterus, causing the baby's body to be torn into pieces and sucked into the tube. The placenta is then cut from the inner wall of the uterus, and the remaining body parts and amniotic fluid are likewise suctioned into a collection jar. The contents are examined, and sometimes the nurse must then reassemble the body of the baby to ensure that all of the body parts have been removed. It was finished. 4 people had been together in that room just minutes earlier, and now only 3 remained. My baby was gone. The abortionist then left the room, and the nurse helped me off the table and walked me to a room where several other women were sitting. All of these women had just had abortions as well. I then asked the nurse for some paper and a pencil. I immediately started to write my parents a letter. I told them that I was okay. I told them that I loved them and that I was sorry that they had been part of such a horrible experience. I told them how ashamed I was of the poor decisions that I had made in my life. I told them not to give up on me. I told them not to worry about me, and that everything was going to be fine. The truth is that everything was not going to be fine. Although I personally would heal physically with no complications, my spiritual and emotional state would begin a downward spiral. In some ways, I was able to carry on with life as usual. I continued to participate in sports, ballet, and piano lessons. I would perform a leading role in our school musical within 2 weeks of my abortion. I kept my abortion a secret from even my closest friends. I hid the sadness, grief, guilt, shame, and anger that I was feeling from my family and loved ones. I did not understand that these feelings and emotions I was experiencing were directly related to my abortion. Over the next few years, I developed a deep depression, but numbed myself with my addiction to marijuana. I was smoking a pack of cigarettes every day, drank alcohol regularly, was experimenting with cocaine and meth, and had become promiscuous. I had no respect for my body and acquired multiple body and facial piercings. Each piercing was an attempt to feel a greater physical pain so that my focus would be taken off the inner pain that I was struggling with. I was a lost soul. I had no relationship with God. I had no hope. I had an emptiness that only Jesus could fill, although I didn't realize it was Jesus that I needed. Over the next 5 years of intense struggles, I began to cooperate with the graces that God was giving me. I was starting to make positive changes in my life. It was by God's grace alone that I was able to become less dependent on my addictions. My piercings came out, and I started taking better care of my mind and body. Although I looked and felt much healthier, my soul was still longing for a deeper peace. While I was searching for this deeper meaning in my life, I met and started dating a young man in 2007. After only a few short months of dating, I was faced again with an unplanned pregnancy. Although pregnancy was not in my plans, I opened my heart to the opportunity to become a parent again. I was without a doubt going to bring this life into the world. Although I was very physically healthy during the pregnancy, my heart and soul was longing for a true relationship with the Lord, so I began a deeper prayer life. I began asking Almighty God to help me. Throughout my pregnancy, I asked God to show me who He had created me to be. I told Him that I was tired of being the person that I was, and that I needed His grace to help me to change. I asked Him to show me His truth and to guide me wherever He wanted me to be. During my pregnancy, my prayers were answered in a big way. God blessed my life with a local pregnancy care center. Pregnancy care centers are places that care for women and her child during her pregnancy. Pregnancy care centers do not refer for abortions. All of the wonderful employees and volunteers at the Pregnancy Care Center became so much more than just employees. They became true friends. The incredible amount of warmth, compassion, generosity, and sacrifice they showed toward myself and my unborn son will never be forgotten. They did everything that they could to make sure that I had all of the support that I needed for every area of my life. They also provided me with post-abortion counseling, which I so desperately needed. God blessed me in particular with a woman named Melinda, who was the director of the center. She became my mentor and one of my very best friends. Although I had the support and encouragement of my family during this second unplanned pregnancy, the staff at the Pregnancy Care Center made sure that I understood that they were there for me, and that there were many couples who would be grateful to adopt my child and possibly pay for my medical expenses if my son's father and I chose not to raise our child ourselves. But we never considered adoption. We agreed to care for and raise our baby together. In August of 2008, I gave birth to my beautiful son. What a joy it was to be a mother. I knew from the moment I laid eyes on my child that being a parent was going to be the most important job that I would ever have. I would love to share all of the amazing miracles that God has done for my family, but the greatest miracle has already been revealed. We have all come to know Christ through His love, mercy, and forgiveness. On the outside, people may see me as a struggling single mother, but on the inside, I have a deep inner peace that is not disturbed by the hardships that come my way. I am now able to see each day as a gift of God's love, and I absolutely treasure the gift of being a mother.
Tomorrow, you gotta hang on till tomorrow. Come what may. Tomorrow, I love ya. Tomorrow, you're only a day